Okay, alright.
Hello and welcome back to the Make Lemonade podcast, a show brought to you by Lemon Squeezy, as we hope to inspire you to make money from your own lemonade stand. I'm one of your co-host James, and I'm back here as always with JR Farr, who is the co-founder and CEO of Lemon Squeezy. JR, how you doing?
I'm doing good, man. Good to see you, James. You're back.
Good to see you too. I'm back. You know what? I usually don't enjoy my trips to the States, especially ones that are really long. So I'm a homebody. I like just got into a nice routine as well, and I was getting through my work, and then this was going to upheave everything. I had New York, LA, and San Francisco all in this trip. New York was just one day. Fine with that. New York's smelly. LA I was kind of interested for because it was going to be nice weather, and we had a little bit more downtime. We had a nice Airbnb. And San Francisco, I can take it or leave it. And when we got to LA, JR, now LA, notoriously great weather, year round, not much rain. I arrived at midnight and it was pissing it down with rain. It was horrid. I had all of my bags worth of podcast recording gear, and I'm like outside the Airbnb. I punch in my code and it doesn't work. And my Uber driver doesn't speak a lick of English. And I'm trying to explain to him, like, oh, can you just stay here? I don't know if I'm in a good or bad neighborhood. So I drive to a hotel or eventually convince my Uber driver to take me to a hotel nearby. And they're like, oh, we've only got one room and it's $600. I'm like, shit, man, I can't pay that. I don't want to go to like some dodgy motel. So I ended up driving around LA for an hour and a half before I eventually managed to call my client, who managed to get through to Airbnb, who managed to wake up the host and change the code and let me in. So I then did the Guillermo recording literally the morning after that. So I was jet lagged, I was tired, but it turned out to be a great episode.
Yeah, I felt bad. I could actually tell. I know you well enough now that I could tell you were fighting through that episode, but I thought it turned out pretty good. I mean, it turned out good. It's had a good response. Yeah,
he's such a legend in the space that he's in, and I think the trouble with that episode is a lot of the stuff was a bit more technical, which a bunch of our listeners really enjoyed, and some of that stuff was going over my head. And it was amazing to see how passionate he is, and how he answered the pressure question, or when we mentioned pressure. That is a huge company, valued $2.5 billion when they last raised. He's got a lot of pressure on his shoulders, but he's one of these special guys that just takes it in his stride.
I thought the same thing, though, about the passion thing. When he answered some of those questions, like, he's really, 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 like, on a mission. And I think that's pretty cool.
Well, talking of someone on a mission, I feel you are very much that, JR, with Lemon Squeezy. And I wanted for us and the listeners to get to know you a little bit in this episode. So today we're going to go through your story to find out a little bit more about JR and how he's got to where he is. Does that sound good?
Yeah, feeling a little, what's the word? Yeah, we'll see if this is interesting to people.
Well, you're just being modest. This is a very cool story, seeing what you've done. For some context, JR has built one of the world's biggest WordPress marketplaces, and then sold it, and then worked at a huge company for 5 years, and now is building one of the biggest payment platforms there is out there with the trajectory that you're on. But yeah, I've pulled a segment from one of my favorite shows, Rob Hope. He's been a guest a couple of weeks ago, called No Context. So I'm going to ask you a few questions without context, and you just have to answer without thinking. Does that sound good?
You're throwing me right in the hot seat, just right out of the gate?
Man. They're fun, but straight into it.
Comes back from
you ready?
LA and he's got an attitude. I like it. Okay, let's do it.
Okay, golf or hockey?
Oh, man. Hockey.
M5 or Ford Raptor?
M5.
WordPress or Framer?
Framer.
Funding or bootstrapped?
Bootstrapped.
Good marketing or good product?
Good marketing.
Customer retention or customer acquisition?
Retention.
Fancy domain or cheap domain?
Oh, fancy domain.
Info product or SaaS?
SaaS.
Lemons or lemonade?
Lemonade.
Oh yeah, JR, you did so well there. I didn't know how that was going to go.
Good. I like those.
Some
people might not get some of those questions, but Yeah.
Well, hopefully over this episode we can understand why I've put some of those in. But JR, let's start out from the beginning. I like to understand where people have come from. Are they from an entrepreneurial family? Did you have a business when you were younger doing sort of stuff that not any of your peers were doing?
Oh, man. Yeah. So I honestly, like, it wasn't like I grew up like super dirt poor, but we were pretty poor. I moved all over the place. I think I went to like 12 different elementary schools. I mean, I was all over the place moving because of that. We were just so unstable. But part of that was probably because I think, the example I saw was a little bit more of a entrepreneur sometimes, where I felt like they were trying to start, my dad was like trying to start something and just couldn't ever stay focused. Yeah. So I feel like that kind of helped me. But yeah, at a young age, I had all the little things. I had a landscaping business. I think when I was like 13, 14 years old, I was like pushing a lawnmower through our neighborhood, which sounds ridiculous. But yeah, I mean, I had a bunch of those types of things when I was a kid, and I loved it. I always knew that I wanted to go into business. I liked marketing. I liked telling stories. And so I don't know. It's just something that I always felt gravitated towards,
Yeah. I think there's definitely an indication for founders later in life if they have done some of this landscaping business. Baseball cards is a common one you get in the States, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Did that one. Yep.
Yeah, did you?
Yeah. I still have it. Yeah.
Oh, wait, hold on. You still have a collection, or you still have the business trading baseball cards?
Yeah, no, I still have a collection of basketball and baseball cards, yeah.
That would be a plot twist. Like, oh, yeah, this is my actual side hustle, and it's doing way better than you would imagine.
That would be hilarious.
Joe, have you always been in Utah? I know you're from Utah now, and that's where you live. Did you grow up there?
Yeah, I bounced around again. Like, I lived in Utah. I lived in Maryland, which is on the east coast of the U.S. So, which was cool because as a kid, like, school it's a big deal. Like, I was right by Washington D.C., right? So like your field trips you're going to like some pretty like U.S. history based type stuff. I lived in Nashville, Tennessee, which is a little bit more down south, like that kind of vibe. Mm-hmm. And then as a kid though, I went to California a lot, so like West Coast stuff. So I've kind of done the gamut. And then when I sold Mojo, obviously I would go to Boston like every 3 months for 6 years, and so I've kind of had all that.
Have you got a favorite spot in the US, and what makes you settle on Utah?
The Utah thing's probably because like families, that makes it a little easier. And I like the seasons. There's the mountains. You can get outside in the summer. I do want some warmer weather. So I think, I don't know. My favorite spot, California's great. Like there's just a lot of good spots. I mean, the state's struggling a little bit these days, but like you were just in San Francisco, you probably saw kind of it's wreaking havoc a little bit on it, but it's a beautiful state and there's like a lot of amazing things there.
So what did you want to do when you were older? You had this sort of entrepreneurial stuff when you were growing up, but did you have a plan?
No, I didn't. No, I mean, I was really into sports as a kid, like played in college, and I don't know. All I know is that when you're poor, you never want to be poor. And so I just was like, I got to do whatever I can to not feel this way anymore. And so it was just a huge motivator. Like I didn't mind working. I even at like 20 years old, I went out and sold door to door, like that kind of thing when I was in college, just to try to make money. And that prepared me for a lot because I wasn't really afraid to do anything. I would get bit by dogs. I would get screamed at people for talking to them. It was a brutal, you're in like 100-degree heat with 100% humidity, just sweating. I mean, nothing phases me now. And so that's probably why I could honestly fly to California or San Francisco last year and raise a Series A, like term sheet by myself in the room by myself with all those people. Like nothing really rocks me because of that experience, I think.
What, do you think that was just the experience when you were at college, or is it like a collective things from like your youth?
Oh yeah, probably all the above. You're probably right.
Yeah. I certainly had some things when I was growing up that has led to the type of person I am now. It's left its own problems as well, but definitely a certain amount of resilience from it too. What did you go to college for?
Business marketing. Yeah, management marketing. Yep.
Why? It seems like a very expensive thing to do, to just do something as vague as business.
Well, I didn't know what the fuck I was doing, but I went to school, tried to figure it out. I was just playing sports, and then I actually didn't graduate. I finished, I went all the way to my senior year, and then I just quit and was getting into the internet thing. The internet thing was big, right? So my first job out of college was basically at an ad agency, and that's when I started flying out to Google Mountain View and learning about Google AdWords at the time, where no one really knew what that was and how to buy a keyword like wine for 10 cents and what that was like to buy the auction, and how you could just drive this much traffic to a website for nothing, basically. And then the way you could manipulate the search engines. Like, there was just so much at that time. It was so ripe.
Why did you stop college in your final year? I hear this a lot, right? People, especially in the US, you spend so much money on your college. Why would you get to your final year and just not see it out? Were you making boatloads of money that you just didn't need to continue it?
Yeah, so I got into the affiliate space. I don't know if I was like making boatloads, but I mean, one, I was just like, I was just boring. And then I had a moment, which, you see, I realized what I was learning, right? The tools and the way that things were being created and built. Nothing like that existed in college. I mean, maybe now they've adapted a little bit, but it was so outdated that I just felt like this just wasn't necessary for what I wanted to do and what I was starting to see was going to be a major shift. And so I just felt like it was a complete waste of time and money. And and then I got into that affiliate world early on. And I mean, I was 23 years old, 24, and getting a check for $60,000 a month, right? Just as an affiliate.
No, whoa, a month? I thought you were going to say a month.
No.
Doing what?
No,
what were your affiliate sites?
Well, one of the first ones I had was like a hockey one. I got into like it's funny enough, a college space, but I got into like all kinds of stuff. I mean, even today, you look at it, like now it's called influencer marketing, but you could go and become a program, generate leads, make sales, drive traffic, all that stuff. But a lot of them was like generating leads for companies at a CPA or a CPL. And I mean, multiple checks. Like, here's a $20,000 check. Here's a $30,000 check. Here's a $60,000 check. Obviously, I had costs because I was running paid stuff, but there was a little ride there that was pretty good. And that actually was what, like, kind of the seed money that got me to where I needed to be for Mojo, which started to let me do that bootstrap.
Were you doing the affiliate stuff on your own? Did you build out a team at this point?
No, it was just on my own.
So bridge that gap then between you making $60,000 to $80,000 a month with affiliate stuff, working this job at this ad company, to then starting Mojo Marketplace and being in the WordPress space.
Yeah, I mean, like, again, I had cost to it, but I mean, it was quite a few years of learning marketing from an online perspective, like, performance-based, digital ads, SEO, affiliate marketing was huge, learning all of that stuff. And I felt like I was like pretty on the edge of like what was happening. Like, I was really there. That's even where I stumbled across WordPress a lot. Like, I used one of the first versions of WordPress, which I'm kind of dating myself, obviously, but it's, man, I sound like an old school guy, but I mean, I was there when the internet was kind of just starting to really take its shape. Right. But it's bridging that gap. I mean, I think it was years and years of trial and error, spending $5,000, losing 10, right? And then I'm upside down. I've got credit card debt. Don't get it twisted. Like, I had moments where I overspent and got burned because it was only me. Had a credit card bill that I had to figure out a way to pay off. There was definitely like some mentors along the way that had helped me kind of get educated on this around copywriting and marketing and getting exposed to it. But I really felt like once I kind of got exposed to it, I kind of had that kind of old thing where I was like, I don't want to be poor. I want to figure this out. I want to figure out how to do something. And that's where I found that WordPress thing. And I was like, man, like, I first wanted to build things on top of WordPress, like kind of how you see Framer and you see Shopify and you see it just keeps repeating itself. Same shit, different decade. But at the time it was like, I really wanted to build something, but I wasn't good enough. Like, I couldn't do what Woo Themes guys were doing, but I'm pretty good at like driving traffic and building these brands. So maybe I'll just build a brand and then start driving everything and I'll just take a cut. And that's where the Mojo Marketplace idea came from. I mean, I think we launched a year after Theme Force, maybe 2 years after Theme Force had. And I mean, that was a crazy ride, like being able to ride the WordPress train. So yeah, that was, I don't know, 3 or 4 years of time, screwing up, learning, figuring it out, and then, launching and building, going from there.
Do you remember around the time of the inception of Mojo, what like the actual process was for creating the site, buying the domain, and fleshing out the idea, getting your first theme listed on it? How did that all work?
This is actually a great question. So I want to, because I think it's still applicable. It's funny, right? Like, so this is 2008 and now are we 14 years? No, geez. We're like 16. Wow.
16 years later.
Oh my gosh. But a lot of the things applied when I did Lemon Squeezy. So I want to talk about these for a second because it's still the same. So it was me and my co-founder Brady. He wanted to be in the CIA. Like he was in Jordan in the Middle East and he learned Arabic at UCLA and he was translating documents for the United Nations, like in the US to Arabic. And I remember seeing him, he was like my best friend. I remember seeing him at the coffee shop and he'd just come back from the Middle East. And I was like, hey, I'm building this thing. It's called Mojo for WordPress. Do you want to do it? And he was telling me about how he wanted to be in the CIA. He's like, yeah, let's do it. So it's just funny that I got him to come over to do that. But it ended up working out. And so when we first started, we didn't really know how to build things. So we had to hire a developer. We did the same thing you did now. Like if you don't know how to do it, we hired a designer, we hired a developer, and we kind of got that first version working. And there was a lot of things that had to take place when we started because it's a marketplace. So we had that chicken or the egg problem. So our business was way hard. Like doing a bootstrap marketplace is the worst thing to do. I think I've said this before. So never do that. But that took us a lot of time to we had to pay a lot of money to get the content. And then we really had to start focusing on the marketing side. But it was wild because I think the first year we did, maybe $500,000. And then the second year we did a couple $1 million, maybe 3. I can't remember, but it went so fast. And we didn't actually know what to do. Like, some of the days we would just try and keep it simple. But I mean, early on, so I'm trying to not jump too far ahead, but I think what I'm saying is we were very focused, I think is like the thing I'd take away. Same with Lemon Squeezy. Like as I look back, you really have to kind of find something and then just put your all into it, like go all in a little bit and see if it's got life and then quickly move away if it's not, right? Like it shouldn't, what I'm trying to say is, when when you've hit something, like, and I think that people are trying to build something and either go ride the wave of an audience and just capture that. Like where I was at with Mojo and Lemon Squeezy was I was like trying to build this audience, and that's really hard to do. So as you start out, things should start to click little by little. You might not be making $10 million, but you should be able to get those first 10, those first 100 users relatively easy. And if you're not, something's wrong and you need to adjust. I think sometimes people take the mistake, like I need to sit and focus on this, work on this, and then they end up actually wasting a lot of time because they haven't even, does that make sense? Like, you need to really make sure you look for those signs because you can waste a lot of time.
Well, we're going to be exploring some of this in Project 100K in terms of focus and spending time on the right things versus the wrong things. And I've heard you speak about this quite a lot, actually, JR, throughout the episodes and podcasts that you've been on about having focus and deciding to do one thing, do it well, and feeling when you have that bit of momentum. People always wonder, when will I know when I should move on from my idea? But generally, you'll feel it, right? If you're working on something for 2 years. Also, you got to be a little bit self-aware. Like, are you putting the effort into it that it needs? And pairing that with feeling when it's going the way you want it to go. I think that's important. So, first of all, I did not know you convinced Brady to do it when he wanted to be in the CIA. Like, how did you pull him? It seemed like you brushed over getting him to join you very easily.
I don't know, actually. I've never thought about that. But yeah, that was like, he was, it's what he wanted to do. And he's really talented at what he does. But I think we were just young and dumb enough and naive enough to just kind of both just be sitting in a coffee shop. Yeah, sometimes you just kind of need to do that. Luckily for us, it worked out, obviously.
So what were you selling at the start? Were you selling themes? Who were making the themes for you? What was it?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, so we did this thing called, so Steve Jobs had just announced the iPad. So again, here I am dating myself. We did this like iPad giveaway thing, and it was really the very first. It was like whoever can upload the most items, we're giving away 3 iPads.
Yeah.
I think they were like $1,500 a piece. Like they were expensive. So it was a lot of money for us. And yeah, it was just like we had, I think in the first month, I think we had like 20 or 30 items for sale after that thing. And it was funny because the person that had uploaded the most, they were from Germany. And so I think it cost just as much to ship the damn thing as it did to buy it. And so, but I remember waiting in line. So back in the day in Apple, you would actually go to the store and wait in line to buy the products. You know, that's how you did it. And so I remember we had to do all that, but it built some hype and it was fun. And, you know, I felt like we did a good job of like, again, just like that marketing side, like maybe not had the best product to start, but we were marketing, we were building hype, we were doing things that were different. No one had ever seen anything like that. And so it created some buzz early on, and we kind of rode that. There was things too, like we did like affiliate. So affiliates was a big thing early on. That was a big part of our income. I think like 25% of our sales came from affiliates. So a lot of those, like, you go back, right, to the 4 or 5 years of me trial and error, learning this skill set. I kind of applied a lot of those learnings into this new thing. And I think, yeah, like it all goes back to distribution, right? Like you have to have distribution to be successful with something, even if you have the world's best product. That's why when you asked me product over marketing, I said that because, I mean, some of the world's best products just don't see the light of day because they don't understand distribution and how important it is.
On the flip side, some really shit products get far too much traction because they have great marketing.
That's a really good point, actually. Yeah, but good for them, I guess.
Anyway, so Mojo Marketplace, you brushed over quite quickly. The first year you made 500,000, year 2 million. That's like a significant amount of growth. Was it all just money in your bank account, really easy, just flying through, getting new users?
No, I mean, like, actually, I will call out one thing. So back to like marketing or product. One of the things that we did right away after we had launched was we had a pretty like cool design. If you went and searched like 2008 Mojo themes designs, it was pretty funny. Like it looked like Mario Land. But we had a guy, his name's Brian Hoff. He's a pretty big designer. I don't know if he's as popular as he was back in the day on the Dribble days, but we had him redesign our site, and that catapulted us. Like I felt like it really leveled us up. So there is something to be said, and this is maybe where I get my appreciation for Orman on Lemon Squeezy, is his brand and his design work. It sets us apart so much that sometimes I think that people really they just undervalue design. They don't have an appreciation for it. And I don't know, there's just something to be said for the white space or the extra pixel or the extra week that it takes to ship a product with Lemon Squeezy is a bit of a pain in the ass because of Orman, but I love him for it because it makes everything so much better, right? And so, and so I think that even goes back. I watched it then where, that next year we had just grown by like 700%. It was like it was so crazy.
So back in 2008, 2009, cool, the old days. How are you convincing people to put their card details in to buy stuff on the internet? Was that a thing that was easy to do, or is that just when people...
I love this question actually, because I didn't think about this, because you see it today on Twitter. Everybody's talking about Stripe or Lemon Squeezy. Like that didn't exist. There was no Stripe. Exactly. So yeah, we had oh my gosh. Yeah, so we had to build some payment rails that were, obviously we had PayPal. Well, it was an option, kind of a similar checkout where we had a credit card hosted experience with recurring or renewals. And that was like a big deal to building out this thing. And I remember we were selling global. So it wasn't just like this was a US based thing. We were selling all over the place, India and Switzerland and Turkey and all that. And then we also had to do payouts. So payouts were a thing of figuring out, how do I get money over here to someone that's in India or someone that's in Belgrade, Serbia, or someone that's in wherever. So yeah, we used PayPal. Gosh, I think we used authorize.net. We had stuff with Payoneer. We had stuff with PayPal. And so we were really like pushing things ahead pretty far for a few years, because I think Stripe came out. I remember the day Stripe came out, and I saw on the website, it was like, if you look at the first homepage of Stripe, there's like a piece of code, and it was like, kind of like, oh, this actually makes a lot of sense. But yeah, we were so far ahead. And even in the WordPress thing, like we built everything on top of WordPress. So like WooCommerce didn't exist. Shopify really wasn't like a thing. Like it was kind of coming up, but so this was all homegrown, like technology that we'd done.
So now, people, as you hear this, do you understand why JR knows and understands so much about sales tax compliance, merchant of record, payment infrastructure? This is why. This is your origin story.
And I think I learned a lot more of it because when we sold Mojo to Endurance, who, you know, owned Bluehost and Hostgator and all that, we went public. And there's a lot of scrutiny, right? Like you have a lot of red tape. And so compliance is a big thing. And so learning about VAT tax was a thing, right? And so I don't know if I would have got the same experience selling globally, right? With digital goods. And, you know, we were selling things every less than a second on the marketplace, you know, which we do now. Yeah. But, you know, you're right. I guess sometimes I feel like my story's so boring because it's my story and it's not as cool as I worked at Google and Facebook and, you know, but I don't know. I guess I do. I guess I do know a lot actually about it.
You do. So we teased it a little bit about this acquisition. We've spoken about it in the past as well. In 2012, Mojo was acquired. Now, JR, you have said in the past that you actually potentially regret doing this at that time because the WordPress wave was still rising rapidly, and you look at where WordPress was in terms of percentage of the internet then and where it is now, and you think that maybe if you'd have stuck with it, it could have been more lucrative. Who knows? But a lot of what happened at the acquirer has led to where you are now with Lemon Squeezy. It might not have ever happened. So what do you think would have happened if you had not sold?
Well, I think so it's a good question because I can actually say that we were the first and only marketplace to ever be listed on WordPress.org as the recommended place to buy themes. Matt Mullenweg did that because we were the fully compliant GPL licensed marketplace at the time. And we were becoming like a big brand to sell. And I think that WordPress was just about to grow up, right? So you can go back and look at the stats of how much WordPress powered the internet. Now it's 40%. So even if I would have hung on to it for a few more years, I think that everything we were doing, and the way it was growing, even if we wouldn't have done anything, we would have just consumed the market, right? Because of how we ranked in the search engines and our affiliate program. And so I do think about that. And I think that, to put it bluntly, like I think sometimes it was a short-term gratification, right? Like wanting to just get a win and taste blood. And if I would have hung on, that would have been a bigger bite and a bigger chunk, right? And so that's the regret. But it's also, I shouldn't say regret because I don't want to have that, right? Like I don't want to be like I have regrets. You know what I mean? Because I am grateful for that time at Endurance, and I met a lot of really amazing people. Like I'll always say this. From when I started the agency, I learned a ton from the people there. When I did Mojo, I learned a ton. When I was Endurance, even, you know what I mean? So like who I am now and delivering everybody, whoever's listening that uses Lemon Squeezy and loves the product, that is all, you are benefiting from all that shit, you know what I mean, that I had to deal with. And so I'm grateful for that.
It's funny how you look at chance encounters and split decisions throughout your life, that the thing you're doing now or your life could have panned out so differently if it wasn't for that chance encounter or someone else making a decision down the line which meant that you were doing this. It's crazy to think of how our lives can be different by not taking the slight different variation in our life.
I have confidence too. Like if we were to ever raise money, right? Like now maybe closer to like a Series B type thing, right? Like I have confidence in myself to be able to run a team like that and run a company like that because of my experience at Endurance. And, you know, we were at the time when we got bought, they were funded by Goldman Sachs and Warburg Pincus. It was very late stage getting ready for the IPO. And so I feel like I got to watch that at a very intimate level, like right there at the desk and the seat. Right. And so that gives me confidence in knowing kind of what I'm doing, you know?
Talk me through that acquisition for you. Like, who approached who? How old were you at the time?
Yeah, late 20s, and it was very much like kind of how it feels now with Lemon Squeezy, where there's a lot of inbound interest. So Bluehost was reaching out, GoDaddy was reaching out. We ended up choosing Bluehost because they were right here in Utah as well, and they had sold to Endurance for about 160 million, and I think they had just bought HostGator for about 225 million, and so. Endurance was acquiring a lot of companies, and it just the story and what we wanted to do as a group. And so it took about 6 months from initial contact to doing the deal. Lots of lawyers, lots of accountants, lots of due diligence, and I think what really pushed it was there was some political things happening in the US at the time. But we actually signed on New Year's Eve, like December 31st, 2012. So
wow.
That was kind of fun because we got to celebrate, that and then go into the new year that way, which was really, really cool. So yeah, that was a crazy experience, just getting everything buttoned up for that day.
JR, money hits your bank account. Explain that feeling, and what was the first thing you bought?
I think for me, like, because again, I'm younger. Like it's not like it was. I never have to work again, right? Like it wasn't that type of money, but it was life changing for me, right? In the sense of like I knew. Yeah, it was just a very, very like comfort, like stability for the first time, where it was like, I feel stable. I feel like I can not have to look at the price of a menu, book a vacation, and not stress. And I talked about this on the mental health thing. Like I think I was working at such a high frequency that actually when that happened, probably 6 or 8 months later is when I kind of had like a crazy experience, because I felt like I didn't know how to work in like such a calm, like normal environment where I was, you know what I mean? It wasn't so chaotic. Like I didn't know how to live in that quiet space of no frenzy burning. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I do encourage people to go and listen to the mental health episode. I think JR and I both agree that was one of our favorite episodes we've both done, and that sort of explains that when you go through an acquisition, it might not always be all it's cracked up to be, where you get the money and now money doesn't make you happy, right? It does to an extent in terms of giving you that stability, but ultimately you lost a bit of your identity after that. So often with an acquisition, from what I've seen, what is suggested at the point of acquisition isn't always how it pans out. So with UJR and the acquisition of Mojo, how different was what was laid out to you of what would happen with Mojo versus what actually happened over the next few years?
So yeah, actually I'll say this. So we had our deal was obviously cash, and then we had an earnout, and then ultimately as we went IPO, we got to participate in that as well. But that's actually a really good point. So one of the things was the earnout was tied to like cash we would earn as the marketplace got integrated. And what I didn't recognize at the time was the way that Endurance was built was like familiar with these brands in the US. There's Procter & Gamble that owns like Tide and all these laundry detergents. So if you go to a grocery store, there's all these brands, right? It's a house of brands. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Endurance was a house of brands, and they all had siloed leadership, tech stacks, incentives. All of them were different deals, right? Think about it. All those people had different ways of they were going to make money. So here we are, probably the smallest of the brands that needed to do the most impact for the brands. And we had to go every single time and pitch ourselves almost and say, hey, leadership team, you have no idea who we are, but this is what we want to do. We want to integrate with your tech stack. We're thinking about doing it through APIs. That was scary. What does that look like? What does that mean? This is 2012, 13, 14, right? And then we had to do that over and over. That took 2 or 3 years. And so looking back, I wish we would have had same, what would you call them? Guardrails for us, where anything outside of our control, we still would have unlocked these certain things, because that wasn't necessarily our fault. And I also I can understand from the higher level business and also each one of the brands why they weren't maybe so motivated to do it at the time. We eventually got every brand and integrated Mojo into everything. And that was really, really cool because that taught me a ton, right? Like how to do all of that from a political standpoint, internally a standpoint, comms perspective, technology perspective, launching marketing campaigns. But to answer your question, that is the one thing that I wish I would have understood is how do I make sure that I'm protected if none of this goes to plan, which it obviously didn't. And most of the time with an earnout, because here's the other thing. When Brady and I were negotiating the deal, we could have taken more cash up front and had a lesser earnout, which we might have, you know what I mean? We probably would have made more that way, but we were like, oh, we'll take the least amount of cash up front and we'll have this longer earnout. And here you got this like something 20-year-old kids that are thinking, we're going to take on the fucking world, right? We can do this. Like nothing's standing in our way. Look what we can do. And so that is probably the one thing that we did. So, but I love me and Brady for that. And I still have that same personality and I have that same night. I'm still naive. Like I still think I believe I can do things like that.
You mentioned quite a lot of things in there. And the one thing that I've asked you about this before, but the politics, your bureaucracy, the stuff you get in a big organization is so different to what you've been used to when you were building Mojo. And there's, man, it's like Game of Thrones when you become an exec at a company at the size you're at.
It is. It is, man.
Is there anything else you want to touch on about your time? Because it was like a big chunk of your life. This was 10 years of Mojo and being in endurance.
Yeah, I think there's probably two things. There was one, which was the culture, learning how to build a culture and a team and scale, hiring 60 people, 100 people in a year type thing, but maintaining a culture and a tight-knit group that understands like, this is our focus, this is where we're going, North Star, like learning how to be a CEO at that level. That was one of the things. Going from a founder to a CEO is it's very difficult, actually. Like, I don't think people understand what that's like if you haven't done it before. You kind of almost feel like every single month or every year, you're taking yourself out of a job. Like you stop doing things that you did and you bring people in that are better than you to do this thing that you were doing. That's really weird. It's an identity thing. So during that time, we hired a lot of people and I hired a lot of friends and just really good people that we built like a strong bond. Like there's a lot of us that still stay in touch from that time. So that was like one thing that I really want to just kind of touch on, I guess, to say thanks to everyone that was part of that. Like there was a lot of families and people that I thought was really cool. But then you also have all the sellers of Mojo that we paid out like millions and millions of dollars to people. And I felt like we changed a lot of people's lives that way. And I think that's one of the reasons why I was so excited about that business and so excited about Lemon Squeezy is my success is tied to the people that use our platform success. So the more successful they are, the more successful we are. And I know I say that a lot, but I can't think of a better way to build a company. Like, having those incentives so tied together, I think it's really, really fun way to run things. So yeah, that was probably a good way to top it off is and how, that's led to like me as we look at Lemon Squeezy and why we do things the way we do, or maybe why a feature is built the way it is, or maybe why we position things. We've built the product in a way that we would want to have it, right? Like, this is how we would want to sell it. This is what we would want it to feel like. This is the Space Mountain ride we would want to jump on, right? So,
go on. I've heard you say this Space Mountain analogy a few times. Go on.
It sounds really funny and a little cheesy, but it really is like one of the early analogies that I used when I thought about Lemon Squeezy and how we would create this. And thanks to Orman and obviously, the team of how we put it all together. But Disneyland, there's a ride called Space Mountain. It's a big experience. Like it's a big ride and you walk up to it and you get into line and it's pitch black and you jump on this roller coaster. And as you go through it, it's completely pitch black and there's lights everywhere and you're moving all around and everyone's screaming and having a good time. But you have no idea how any of this is really happening. And the analogy that I say is that if you turned the lights on, you would see rods and wires and dust and trash and how all this is made, and it would actually not be as cool. And I just felt like in 2020, when we were thinking about life had given us lemons, right, with all the crazy pandemic and all the stuff that was going on, and how do we make lemonade? And I just thought, man, you still have to connect all of these dots to sell something. So how could we make this easy peasy, lemon squeezy, Space Mountain, turn the lights off, get on the ride, put the seatbelt on, and just do what you do best. And that's that's where it all came from. And I know it's a little cheesy, but I just think it's a really, really cool analogy.
I think it's great. And as you said, that has come from your time with Mojo and Endurance, and it sort of influences a lot of what Lemon Squeezy is. Now, we will get to Lemon Squeezy, but I want to hear about what happened once you'd done your earn out and the Game of Thrones was too much for you and you decided to leave and buy a fucking expensive domain.
Yeah. Actually, I resigned, and I was really into that. At the last part was churn and retention, and I felt like, how could I? Everything that I've learned, the idea was, how could I help the little people, the little guys win, the little businesses that don't have this much money as a public organization to do all these things that I was doing. That's where Weav was born. And I went out and bought this crazy domain, spent $65,000 on Weav.com. And we were building SaaS retention. Like, we were focused on SaaS. How do we make it super easy to combat churn, the involuntary, the voluntary churn, failed payments, but also the cancellation flows? We can't come up with all those ideas. We had a JavaScript snippet you could install, and you could customize your whole cancellation flow. You could offer discounts and coupons to save them. There was so much to this product. And that's why it was called Weav, was we would actually import all of your kind of Stripe data. We would analyze everything that it was doing. We would try to predict maybe what was happening in certain pockets, why they were canceling from these plans versus that plan, and bubble up all these interesting pieces of information. And so that was, but honestly, I breeze over that a lot, but there's a lot of things in Lemon Squeezy, like our failed payment recovery stuff, that was all born out of the Weav learnings that are really powerful. And I think, sometimes I don't give that the credit it probably deserves with how much, recovery that does for free for people.
That's a good point, actually. And you've said on other shows before about why you ultimately think Weav didn't work out, but that's potentially something you could have raised for?
I think so. And it was B2B. It needed sales, like a real sales organization, I think, because there was education on why and integrations, and it was a slower sales cycle that kind of made it, just a little difficult to like bootstrap and like just kind of do it the way. And then shortly after, I had kind of started just slowly chat with, I was looking to do honestly like some more angel investing. I had done some angel investing with a few products that had, like, some of them had panned out. And so I started talking to a few people back in those WordPress days, and I was looking at a few of their businesses, and then I ended up getting in touch with like Orman and Jason Schuler, and that kind of led to this, idea. Mm-hmm.
So tell me about those conversations. Had we sort of fizzled out at that point, or was it still going?
It was still going. I had actually just got like a sign up from ClickFunnels, who's like a pretty big business. I wasn't really sure. And then eventually I kind of just had made that decision based off what I'd said earlier in the episode, was like, I just need to focus on this. And so this is what I'm going to do. So shut it down.
Mm-hmm. No, fair enough. So talk to me about how those conversations came about with Orman and Jason. Were you reaching out to them? Orman famously has dunked, and I don't know what Jason did actually.
Yeah, no, good question. It was actually, there's another guy named Chris Molitor. Him and Jason had built a company called Rivet, which is like a video hosting kind of YouTube. You'd take your YouTube channel, it would build a website for you. It was pretty cool. And I had reached out to them and said, hey guys, like, this thing looks like it's kind of stalled. Like, is there anything I can do to help? Could I invest? Could I do some marketing? And then that kind of led to like, well, we have some other ideas. And then they were like, we've been talking to Orman too about Lemon Squeezy. And Lemon Squeezy, Orman had that domain and he wanted to do like a website builder. And I think we had all kind of come to the realization that this was a problem that had probably been solved already by quite a few people. So, but that kind of came from his dunked experience. So yeah, so those conversations just really started to brew. And then, I don't know, I think I maybe felt like I had pushed probably a lot of like this Shopify for digital products, or, digital products, Etsy style type thing. And we started to kind of shape up this concept. And that's actually when we thought, well, we got to start building something. And so we pinged Gilbert and said, hey, I know you're over here, but what if you quit your job and we paid your salary and we built this thing? And so that's how it started. And it was Jason and Orman and me and Gilbert that had kind of kicked everything off that way.
And this was the formation of the umbrella companies Make Lemonade, which has sort of absorbed some of Ormond stuff, and you've got Iconic as well. Talk to me about the discussions in terms of bringing that stuff together under this umbrella.
Yeah, so think of it like this. It was 2020. It's pissing lemonades. Let's make lemonade, right? So we came up with this funny brand. Let's not take life too serious. Let's try and just build this really amazing portfolio of brands that people will love and appreciate. And Lemon Squeezy was kind of the first bet, and then we had a bunch of ideas. And you and I have talked about this, where it was like, could we do this kind of like holdco portfolio of brands type thing? But as you know, the inertia and the size of Lemon Squeezy has overtaken everything. And so pretty early, we had decided it was probably time to just go all in on this, especially when we were thinking about raising money. Like, I didn't want to go to investors and say, hey, we have Lemon Squeezy, but we also have all these other things. I really wanted it to be like focused, right? Like, this is what we do. This is the problem we're solving. This is what we're all focused on. And so that just naturally happened pretty quick. And so Make Lemonade, I think, still exists. Maybe one day, depending on how things pan out, maybe there's something we'll do. But for now, I think it's just kind of it's out there as a nice idea. But for now, it's Lemon Squeezy is the focus.
So you're like unleashed here back into sort of what you know and love, JR. It's building something from scratch. How are you generating hype for Lemon Squeezy, putting marketing out there? Are you giving away iPads? What are you doing for this?
Yeah, it's funny. I think now that you ask me, I think it was really good. Like, I had come from this really, really raw kind of founder, I'm just going to recap the acquisition, the IPO, becoming more of a true executive at a public company, right? And there was a lot that I had learned about structure and processes and things that maybe aren't always needed, but I do think there's a balance, right? Like, you can't just be so willy-nilly and just loosey-goosey with, I'm going to build this thing and it's just going to work, right? Like, there has to be some sort of strategy behind things. And so when we launched, there was a lot of things early on, decisions that were made, I think, based off some of our experience. Or, I know for me, from my experience, that I had kind of really tried to incorporate as we thought about how to build this. And I'm saying more from, let's get something out there. Let's see what sticks. Let's build hype. Let's do, let's really just focus on kind of this product-led growth. But it actually took me a second, to be honest, like just getting back to founder to executive, back to founder, right? Like really having to get my hands dirty again and roll my sleeves up and get into the support queue again and like all that stuff. But it's been really fun. And I think as I look early on, it took Gilbert 6 months to build the first version of Lemon Squeezy. And I should say Ormond and Gilbert and all of us, just like product and ideation and how we're going to do this and talking to users and would you use this if we built this? And if we did build it, what would you want? And I noticed you're selling this over here. What would you need? And there was a lot of that, right? And then we obviously built our own products that used it. And so we had that working for us. And I actually think that's one of our advantages was we were scratching our own itch and eating our own dog food and building something that we would want from the years of kind of pain, right? But we really kind of started to build an email list. And once that kind of got ready, we emailed it and that kind of helped get the ball rolling. And I think that we were really good at being consistent. We still are. Like, you see it, right? Like, we're still shipped regularly. We're proactive with our comms. Like, that sort of stuff. Like, I'm talking blocking, tackling, 101 basics. It just works. Like, with that consistency type stuff.
Yeah. What was your positioning with it? Because I think there's a bunch more awareness now around global tax compliance and merchant record, why it's a good thing. Some people are getting a bit frustrated with Stripe fees as well. Gumroad obviously had their price rise as well. So how were you positioning at that time? Because the marketplace is very different 3 years ago.
You're right. To be totally honest, I feel like when we first came out, we were almost too wide and we had to quickly adapt. So like, I think the first homepage was like sell digital products the easy peasy way. Like, it just wasn't, there wasn't like, but why here? What's different? Who is this for? And this is me speaking to anyone that like is thinking about their positioning and stuff. I would say we're in a world now where if you can get into niche and then even a super niche to start is the way to go. And then it never, because you can always widen once you get out there. So what happened was when we did this, and I remember being a little scared. I was like, man, I don't know if I want to just like cut off everybody over here, you know? But we decided to go out as we spoke to software companies, like SaaS companies. That was like a big shift that we had made. And we called them software companies, like anybody selling any sort of software. And then the wedge that we used, not to play on words, the wedge we used to bring people in was around the tax compliance, because the pandemic had happened and there was a lot of things happening around the sales tax compliance and VAT and stuff. And obviously we knew all that, but I had realized that not a lot of people really understood this. And then Stripe had bought TaxJar. And so that started getting a lot of exposure. So I was like, man, this is like how we're going to do it. We're going to have a wedge, which we'll help you with sales tax compliance, you know, and if you're a software company, this is who we're talking to. And then we started to build this kind of all-in-one thing where we just started to say, if I was a software company and I'm selling globally, well, I need all of these other things to do it. Payment processing, email, affiliates, subscription, you know, billing management, all the things we've been building to just truly make that easier. And even if we look ahead in 2024 right now, right, like that is still there, where I'm still trying to say, okay, in 2024, have I really solved it to where you can sell anything digital with Lemon Squeezy if you're doing software? I'm talking, we got to finish up Discord bot. How do I make sure I can give access to servers? How can I do Telegram stuff? How can I make sure that courses and memberships is dialed? How can I make sure, like all of these things, I really want to make sure that we can support. And so that's where like a lot of our attention is right now. There's a lot of back pressure for us to release support for physical products, but I don't even want to like touch that stuff until I truly feel like digital is something we have nailed across the board.
That's interesting. I didn't realize you were getting
it's daily
pressure.
Daily. Yeah.
That is curious. At what point did you switch your positioning from digital products to software companies? Because I just went on Lemon Squeezy website and I can see it's positioned for software companies and SaaS, but a ton of people sell their digital products, and that was what it initially was. When was the switch?
We actually got a little lucky. So our first version of our site went out to the public. We started teasing everything in like early 2021, like March and April, like beta invites went out. July 28, 2021, we go public, right? And then by October of 22, we released the brand new website, the look, the feel, the positioning. And then 2 months later, Gumroad raised their prices. So it was perfect because that same month, we had finished migration tools for Gumroad, for Paddle and Stripe. So we were like literally just a few months ready, you know what I mean, before this whole thing about it happened. So I think looking back, we obviously made the right choice, just kind of really narrowing in our focus and getting the site ready.
And when you launched Lemon Squeezy, I remember the pricing was monthly pricing, right? With a fee on top of that. How did your pricing switch, and when did that switch to just...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, very beginning was, well, we had a free plan, but you paid a much higher percentage. I don't know if you remember this, but there was a free plan and you'd pay like a higher percentage. And then we had, if you paid monthly, we would reduce your rates. I think ultimately what drove that was we felt like it didn't match the brand ethos, which is easy peasy. This is confusing. Like, what is this one? What is that one? We just wanted it to be, it's one price. You get everything. This is how it works. You know, we tried to make it, that's where that came from. And there's still internal debates even about the email offering. Like, do we just make that free? Do we just include it so we don't have to deal with another price off to the side? It's a little like, you know, confusing. So
how was it in terms of making your first million, going from this monthly subscription to just measuring via GMV?
Oh man, it's been so back to like knowing when something's working. You know, I think early on we felt like we had people that really seemed to enjoy the product, and there was a lot of excitement around what we were doing, and that helped us kind of, what do you call it? Like keep the wind in our sails, right? Like keep us floating, right? Like, and I think slowly we could kind of see some progress, but it was like nothing, and then all of the sudden, for us because of what had happened, right? So like we were growing, but it wasn't until we had that coming out party with the Gumroad thing, and I think that now it's been even just like now it's becoming Lemon Squeezy versus Stripe, which is really interesting, and it's different for every person. So, or every business. Some people need it, some people don't, and some people want to do it themselves. And there's no like right or wrong decision. I see sometimes, man, people just get so angry about what we're doing. You know what I mean? It's like, dude, calm down. Like, focus on your own business. Like, if you don't want to use it, or if you don't want someone to use it, that's fine. But you know, we need to all just chill out a little bit. But it's funny, just some of the emotions that are getting drawn up over this. But
over a payment processor, payment platform. Yeah. When people compare you to Stripe, often they don't realize that you use Stripe. Stripe are your friends.
Stripe are our friends, yeah.
Well, JR, is fascinating to go through your story. Thank you for sharing some of the insights, the ups, the downs throughout it. I want to round off just quickly getting to know JR as a human, what you're doing outside of work. We love asking guests these questions because they're not just their company. Like, you might wrap your personality online around it, but what else are you doing in your spare time, JR?
Well, for me, it's at this point in my life, it's probably finding ways to decompress. So family's big for me. Like that's one of probably the biggest thing, is just trying to make sure I stay close with my family, spend time with the kids. That's number one. Number two is like fitness, like physical side for me. Like, I like to stay fit. I like to stay active. Yeah, like sports, fishing, like outdoor stuff, golf, hockey. I still play hockey. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't fish as much as I would like. I'd like to get more into like fly fishing this year. There's something, man, sometimes I just sound so lame, but there's something about fishing where like when you go, so just right behind, you know, I'm like right here by the mountains. And so within like 10, 20 minutes, I can literally be up in a stream. And there's something about it being warm in July. It's 70 degrees outside in the morning. It's 6 o'clock in the morning. The sun's just barely coming up. And you're standing in the water. No one's out there, and you can just hear the water. It's crazy. Like, just to be that close to like earth and like, you know what I'm saying? Like outside and just being in the elements. I think that so I'm trying to do more of that. I think that's like, because we're all so connected, because we're so Twitter scrolling and everything, right? Like, you gotta do that stuff.
You're so right. And like, yeah, fishing can sound, I think you said lame, but you've just justified it beautifully. And that is, I think, what I and more people need in our lives. It's more of that stuff which is slower, less going on in your head. You can decompress, as you say. I've been trying to do way more reading at the moment, and just being fine in my own thoughts and not having all this constant barrage of stimulation, and just calming down, reading, going for a walk. I'm really enjoying cycling at the moment. Probably
it's good.
Kind of similar reasons you like. I love being just outside,
disconnected.
Yeah,
because I think like, I feel like I'm at a spot right now with Lemon Squeezy anyway, where something that's keeping me up is just this responsibility, right? And like feeling like I gotta keep going. And sometimes I even think about the fundraising thing again, and should we be doing that to really like catapult what we've created? We've built something that people are excited about. They rely on it. I don't even know if I'm making sense, but yeah, just like sometimes I wrestle with the idea of like the path we're on versus do I need to, but does that actually make it worse, because then we don't have control of what we're doing, you know? And so that's something that I'm really, really mulling over right now.
All right, well, JR, it's been great to get to know you a little bit better. I hope the listeners have enjoyed getting to know you as well, and hopefully you can improve your golf game and get out fishing more often.
Thanks, man. Good catching up.
Okay, all right.